I once watched a woman fold a worn piece of paper into her wallet with trembling hands, and 3 weeks later, she walked into my study wearing a new coat and carrying a check she never expected. She didn't win the lottery. She didn't inherit money. She didn't marry rich or suddenly become clever with stocks. What she did was simpler and stranger than any of that. She placed one verse, one small arrangement of words, into the leather fold where she kept her dollars, and she let those words rearrange the invisible architecture of her life. That verse became a seed. And seeds, my dear friend, don't ask permission to grow. They simply do what they were designed to do. They split open in the dark, they reach, they transform, and they produce after their kind. Now I'm going to tell you something that might sound absurd to the rational mind, but your rational mind has never made you wealthy, has it? Your rational mind has kept you exactly where you are, calculating, worrying, trying to figure out how the bills will be paid, how the opportunity will come, how the door will open. But wealth, real wealth, doesn't come through the door of reason. It comes through the door of law. Spiritual law. The kind of law that was operating long before you learned to doubt it. The kind of law that doesn't care if you understand it, only if you use it. And the verse I'm about to share with you is not just a pretty sentence to make you feel better for 5 minutes. It's a key, a literal key to the vault that's been locked inside your own consciousness. The vault where your 2026 wealth is already stored, already waiting, already stamped with your name. You see, most people think wealth is out there, somewhere in the future, in the hands of employers or the economy or lucky breaks. But I'm here to tell you that your wealth is in here, in the invisible substance that responds to your word, your belief, your absolute knowing. And when you put this verse in your wallet, you're not performing some superstitious ritual. You're making a declaration. You're planting a flag in the territory of your own mind and saying, this is law now. This is done. Not someday. Not if I'm good enough. Not if I work hard enough. Now. It's law now. And when you begin to live this way, something extraordinary happens. The universe starts to rearrange itself around your conviction. Not because you're forcing it. Not because you're pushing and straining. But because you've aligned yourself with the divine pattern that was already there. I've watched this happen time and time again. A woman came to me once, absolutely convinced she was destined for poverty. Her father was poor, his father was poor, and she decided that was simply her lot. She wore her lack like a family heirloom, polished it daily with her words. We've never had money. We never will. I asked her a simple question. Do you believe God plays favorites? She blinked at me. Of course not. Then why, I said, would infinite abundance be available to everyone except you? You see, we think we're being humble when we accept limitation. We think we're being realistic, practical, sensible. But what we're actually doing is calling God a liar. Because God said, it is done unto you as you believe, not as you hope, not as you wish, as you times believe asterisk. That woman started speaking differently, started seeing herself differently. Within 6 months, an opportunity came that transformed everything. Did it fall from the sky? No. It came through a conversation, a connection, a door that had always been there, but she'd never had eyes to see it before. This is what I mean by law. The spiritual world operates on principles as reliable as gravity. You don't beg gravity to work. You don't plead with it or convince it. You simply align with it, and it does what it does. Your word is your wand. Every time you speak, you're casting. You're setting forces in motion. When you say, I am poor, you're not describing reality. You're times creating times it. When you say, I am always late, you're giving orders to the universe. When you say, nothing good ever happens to me, you're blocking every good thing that's trying to reach you. Most people use this power unconsciously, against themselves. They're wizards who've forgotten their magic, stumbling around casting curses by accident. But you're waking up now. You're remembering. And let me tell you, the moment you remember changes everything. It's like someone flips on the lights in a dark room, and suddenly you see all the furniture you've been bumping into for years. You realize, oh my God, I've been doing this to myself. I had a woman come to me once, desperate. She said, Florence, I can't keep a job. Every single place I work, within 6 months, something goes wrong. They fire me, or the company folds, or my boss turns against me. And I said, darling, what are you saying about work? She looked at me like I'd asked her to solve calculus. What do I say? She repeated. I nodded. Yes, what story are you telling? She thought for a moment, then laughed bitterly. Well, I always say nothing good ever lasts for me. I tell my friends that as soon as things start going well, the other shoe drops. There it was, the spell. She'd been programming her subconscious mind like a computer, feeding it the same instruction over and over. Good things don't last. The other shoe always drops. And her faithful subconscious, that perfect servant, said, "Yes, ma'am, right away, ma'am," and made absolutely certain that every job ended exactly as she predicted. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you. It doesn't say, "Are you sure about that?" It just obeys. It's like the most loyal employee you'll ever have. It never questions your orders, never takes a sick day, works 24 hours without complaint. The only problem? It can't tell the difference between an instruction that helps you and one that destroys you. It just does what you tell it to do. So when you say, "I never have enough money," your subconscious gets to work making sure you never have enough money. When you say, "All the good ones are taken," it arranges your love life accordingly. When you declare, "I always get sick in winter," congratulations, you've just placed your order with the universe, and it's preparing your seasonal illness like clockwork. Most people are walking around giving themselves the worst possible instructions and then wondering why life feels so hard. They're programming themselves for failure, poverty, sickness, and loneliness, then blaming God, blaming circumstances, blaming their parents, blaming the economy. The most dangerous prayer you can ever pray is the prayer of complaint. Every time you say, "Nothing ever works out for me," you're praying. Every time you say, "I can never catch a break," you're praying. Every time you say, "I'm so unlucky," you're praying. And the universe, in its infinite obedience, says amen to every single word. I've watched people pray themselves into poverty. They wake up every morning and recite their litany of lack. "I can't afford this. I'll never have that. Money slips through my fingers. I wasn't born with a silver spoon." And then they sit in church on Sunday and wonder why God isn't blessing them. Darling, God is trying to bless you, but you keep canceling the delivery with your own words. Here's what nobody tells you. Your subconscious mind doesn't have a sense of humor. It doesn't understand sarcasm. It doesn't know the difference between a joke and a decree. When you say, even in jest, "I'm so broke I can't pay attention," your subconscious takes notes. When you laugh and say, "I have the worst luck with relationships," you're writing that into your story. When you casually mention, "I'm terrible with money," you're giving yourself a command that your deeper mind will follow to the letter. I knew a woman who constantly joked about being a hot mess. She'd introduce herself that way. "Hi, I'm Sarah, resident hot mess." She thought it was endearing, self-deprecating humor. What she didn't realize was that she was giving herself an identity, and we always live up to our identity. Her life was chaotic because she had declared chaos as her nature. Her relationships fell apart because messes don't maintain order. Her finances were scattered because she had claimed disorganization as her permanent state. I finally told her, "Stop wearing your dysfunction like a badge of honor. Stop making your problems your personality." The moment you claim something as just who you are, you've locked yourself in a prison of your own making. And you know what happened when she finally heard that truth? She got angry, not at me, at herself. Because deep down, she knew I was right. She'd been hiding behind her story for so long that she'd forgotten what life looked like without the armor. Here's what nobody tells you about playing the victim. It's exhausting. It takes more energy to maintain that identity than it does to actually change. You have to constantly remind yourself and everyone around you why you can't, why you shouldn't, why it's too hard, why you're different. You become a full-time employee of your own misery. I see this pattern everywhere. People who introduce themselves with their trauma. "Hi, I'm Jessica. I have anxiety." "I'm Marcus. I grew up poor." "I'm Sarah. My ex destroyed me." As if that's their name tag. As if that's all they are. Listen carefully. Your past is not your identity. Your wounds are not your worth. Your struggles are not your substance. I had another client who would start every single conversation with her divorce story. Didn't matter if we were talking about business, health, or what she had for breakfast. Somehow, we'd end up back at her ex-husband, 5 years after the divorce. 5 years of reliving the same betrayal, rehearsing the same anger, reciting the same grievances. I finally asked her, "How much rent is he paying to live in your head?" because he's taken up residence there, and you're giving him free accommodation 24 hours a day." She looked at me like I'd slapped her, but then something shifted. She realized she'd been keeping him alive in her story, giving him power he no longer had in her actual life. She was the one holding the door open. She was the one sending the invitation. She was the jailer pretending to be the prisoner. That's the twisted part about victim identity. You think you're trapped, but you're actually the one holding the key. You just don't want to use it because then you'd have to admit you had the power all along. And if you had the power all along, then staying stuck was a choice. And that truth? That truth is terrifying. Because if it's a choice, then you're responsible. And responsibility feels heavier than victimhood. Victimhood gives you someone to blame. Responsibility gives you everything to do. But here's what happens when you finally accept it, when you stop fighting the mirror and start changing what it reflects. The universe stops resisting you. Because it was never resisting you in the first place. You were resisting yourself. I had a student once, brilliant woman, sharp as a tack, who came to me in tears. She'd been passed over for a promotion for the third time. "They don't see my value," she said. "I work harder than anyone else, but they keep choosing people who do less." So I asked her a simple question: "Do you see your value?" Silence. When you present your work, do you speak with confidence or apology? When someone asks what you do you own your expertise or diminish it? When you think about your contributions, do you celebrate them or immediately list what you should have done better? She stared at me. I don't want to seem arrogant. There it was, the belief, and it was running her entire career. She didn't want to seem arrogant, so she made herself small. She apologized for taking up space. She downplayed her achievements. She waited to be noticed instead of declaring her worth. And the mirror? It reflected that perfectly. Bosses who overlooked her, colleagues who took credit, opportunities that went to others. Not because the world was unfair, because she had taught everyone exactly how to treat her. So we changed the inner conversation. We replaced "I don't want to seem arrogant" with "I confidently own my value." We practiced speaking about her work without apology. We rehearsed, asking for what she deserved. And within 2 months, she was offered a position she hadn't even applied for. A better title, more money, more respect. Did the world change? No. She did. The world just mirrored it back. This is what people don't understand about manifestation. They think it's about vision boards and affirmations and pretending you're happy when you're not. It's not. It's about becoming so aligned with what you desire that the universe has no choice but to reflect it. It's about changing the frequency you're broadcasting so the stations you tune into change automatically. You don't attract what you want, you attract who you are. And when you become someone who expects miracles, miracles become your natural habitat. Let me tell you about my neighbor, Sarah. For years, she complained about being broke. Every conversation was about bills, lack, struggle. But here's what I noticed. She would find a $20 bill on the street and immediately say, "Great, but it's only $20. I need $2,000. She would get a small check in the mail and say, "This barely covers anything." Every gift from the universe was met with disappointment because it wasn't enough. Then one day, after we talked, she started a practice. Every single time money came to her, in any amount, she would stop. She would hold it. She would say out loud, "More is coming. This is evidence that the universe is taking care of me. A penny on the ground? Thank you. More is coming. A $5 discount? Thank you. More is coming." Within 3 months, her entire financial situation transformed. Not because the practice was magic, but because she stopped being someone who rejected abundance. She stopped being someone who told the universe, "What you're giving me isn't good enough." The universe doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your state of being. When you say, "I want money," while feeling broke, you're broadcasting broke. When you say, "I want love," while feeling unworthy, you're broadcasting unworthiness. The words don't matter. The frequency does. This is why affirmations fail for most people. They stand in front of the mirror saying, "I am wealthy," while their entire body, their entire energy system screams, "I'm lying to myself." And the universe responds to the scream, not the whisper. You cannot lie to the universe. You cannot fake your frequency. But here's the beautiful part. You can shift it. Not by pretending, not by faking it, but by finding evidence that supports the identity you want to step into. If you want to be someone who is financially abundant, find evidence that you're already supported. The roof over your head, the food in your fridge, the fact that you've survived every financial challenge so far. This isn't about being grateful for scraps. This is about recognizing that you've never actually been abandoned by the universe. If you want to be someone who is loved, find evidence that you're already worthy of love. Look around your life right now. I don't care how broken it feels. There's evidence everywhere. That friend who texted you last week just to check in. The barista who remembered your order. The stranger who held the door. The part of you that got out of bed this morning even though everything felt heavy. You think these are coincidences? Random acts in a meaningless void? No. These are breadcrumbs from the universe, showing you that connection is your natural state. Love is already happening. You've just been too busy mourning its absence to notice its presence. I knew someone who swore they were unlovable, completely convinced. They'd recite every rejection like a religious text. Every failed relationship was proof. Every unanswered message was evidence. They built an entire identity around being unwanted. Then one day I asked them, who drove you to the hospital last month when you were sick? Their sister. Who sends you funny videos when you're down? Their coworker. Who called on your birthday even though you didn't pick up? Their mom, 3 times. They had spent so much energy collecting evidence of abandonment that they'd become blind to the evidence of devotion. The love was there. It was always there. They just refused to count it because it didn't look the way they expected. This is what we do. We create these impossible standards for proof. Love only counts if it comes from that one person. Success only counts if it looks exactly like this. Abundance only counts if the number has enough zeros. And then we wonder why we feel perpetually empty. The universe doesn't work on your narrow definitions. It doesn't speak only one language. It sends you what you need in 1,000 different forms, and you reject 99 of them because they arrived in the wrong wrapping paper. If you want to embody a new identity, you have to learn to recognize the evidence that already supports it. Not someday. Not when everything is perfect. Right now, in the mess, in the middle, in the mundane moments you've been dismissing as meaningless. You've been saying, you'll start when you lose the weight, when you get the promotion, when you find the relationship, when you have more time, when the kids are older, when you're more confident. But that's the trap. That's the ego keeping you small under the disguise of being practical. Your higher self doesn't need perfect conditions. It thrives in chaos. It emerges through cracks. It shows up most powerfully when everything around you says it's impossible. I've watched people manifest miracles from hospital beds. I've seen breakthroughs happen in traffic jams, divine downloads arrive during arguments, life-changing ideas surface while doing dishes. The universe doesn't wait for your permission or your perfect setup. It works with what you give it, and right now, this messy, imperfect moment is what you have. So let's talk about practical action, because this isn't just philosophy, this is physics. You take one small step toward your vision, and the universe has to respond. Not might respond, has to. It's law. When you move in faith, even when you can't see the full staircase, the next step materializes. But you have to move first. This is where most people stall. They want the complete roadmap before they take the first step. They want guaranteed outcomes. They want to see how it all unfolds before they risk anything. But that's not how faith works. That's not how manifestation works. That's not how life works. Faith is not belief in an outcome. Faith is action in the face of uncertainty. You don't need to know how it will happen. You just need to know that it will and act accordingly. When you shift from, I hope this works, to, this is already done, your entire energy changes. You stop pushing and start allowing. You stop forcing and start receiving. I'm going to say something that might make you uncomfortable. You're not blocked because you don't know what to do. You're blocked because you know exactly what to do, and you're refusing to do it. Deep down, you know the relationship that's draining you. You know the habit that's holding you back. You know the conversation you need to have. You know the project you need to start. You know the boundary you need to set. You know the conversation you need to have. You know the project you need to start. You know the boundary you need to set. But knowing and doing are two different countries, and most of us live our entire lives at the border crossing, waiting for permission to enter. Let me tell you something that changed everything for me. You don't need permission. You never did. The voice that told you to wait, to be ready, to be more qualified, that wasn't wisdom. That was fear wearing a disguise. I spent years thinking I needed one more credential, one more sign, one more confirmation before I could step into what I was called to do. And you know what happened during those years? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because waiting for perfect conditions is just procrastination dressed in prudence. The universe doesn't reward preparation, it rewards action. Think about every major shift in your life, the job you finally applied for, the relationship you finally left or entered, the city you finally moved to. Did any of them happen because you felt completely ready? No. They happened because you moved despite not feeling ready. Readiness is a myth we tell ourselves to avoid the discomfort of growth. Here's what actually happens when you act before you're ready. You become ready through the acting. The clarity you're seeking doesn't come before the step, it comes because of the step. You don't think your way into a new life, you live your way into new thinking. I watch people wait for confidence like it's a package being delivered to their door. When I feel confident, then I'll do the thing. But confidence doesn't work that way. Confidence is the result of doing the thing scared. It's the residue of action, not the prerequisite for it. You build confidence the same way you build muscle, through repetition, through strain, through doing what feels impossible until it becomes possible, and then doing it again until it becomes easy. So what's the thing you're waiting to feel ready for? What's the move you keep postponing until conditions are perfect? Let me save you some time. The conditions will never be perfect. There will always be a reason to wait. There will always be something else you could learn, some other skill you could develop, some other sign you could look for. But here's what I learned. Action creates clarity. You don't think your way into a new way of acting, you act your way into a new way of thinking. Every time you move forward, even in the smallest way, you receive feedback from the universe. You learn what works and what doesn't. You discover resources you didn't know existed. You meet people who show up at exactly the right moment. I once knew a woman who wanted to start a business, but kept waiting until she understood everything about entrepreneurship. She read book after book, took course after course, analyzed every possible scenario. 5 years passed. Then one day, her friend who knew almost nothing about business just launched something messy, imperfect, barely ready. Within 6 months, that friend had learned more through doing than my acquaintance had learned in 5 years of studying. That's when it hit her. Preparation can become procrastination in disguise. We tell ourselves we're being responsible, being smart, being thorough, but often we're just being afraid. And the universe doesn't reward perfection, it rewards movement. It rewards faith in action. You don't need to see the whole staircase, you just need to take the first step. Then the next step appears. Then the next. Think about it this way. If you were going to drive across the country at night, you wouldn't wait until the entire route was illuminated before you started. Your headlights only show you the next 200 feet of road. But those 200 feet are enough. You drive those 200 feet, and then the next section becomes visible. And eventually, you arrive at your destination not because you saw the whole journey at once, but because you kept moving forward into whatever was illuminated in front of you. Your life works the same way. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to take the next right step with whatever light you have. The path reveals itself to the person who walks it, not to the person who stands at the beginning, demanding to see the entire route mapped out in advance. Think of it like standing at the edge of a forest at dawn. You can only see a few feet ahead where the light touches the ground. But as you step forward, more light comes. The path doesn't appear all at once, it appears step by step, breath by breath, choice by choice. I've watched people paralyze themselves waiting for certainty. They want guarantees before they begin. They want to know exactly how it will unfold, who will help them, what obstacles they'll face, and whether success is assured. But life doesn't work that way. Faith doesn't work that way. Faith is not about having all the answers. Faith is about trusting that the answers will come when you need them. It's about believing that the universe is fundamentally for you, not against you. That every experience, even the difficult ones, contains within it a gift meant specifically for your growth. When I take action from this place of trust, everything shifts. I'm no longer forcing and manipulating. I'm no longer exhausting myself trying to control every variable. Instead, I'm flowing with an intelligence far greater than my limited human perspective. Here's what I want you to understand. Your willingness is more important than your ability. Your readiness to show up matters more than your expertise. Because when you show up willing, life meets you there. Help arrives, doors open, people appear, resources materialize. I've seen it happen too many times to call it coincidence. The woman who finally admits she needs support suddenly receives a phone call from an old friend offering exactly what she needs. The man who decides to pursue his calling despite having no clear plan stumbles upon the perfect opportunity within weeks. The person who chooses forgiveness finds that burden they've carried for years simply dissolves. This is how the universe works. It responds to movement, to decision, to commitment, not to perfect plans, but to sincere steps. And here's the beautiful part. You don't have to believe me. You can test it yourself. Take one small action toward what your heart is calling you to do. Just one. Watch what happens. Notice what doors begin to crack open. Pay attention to who shows up. Observe how the path starts to reveal itself. Because that's when you'll know. Not through my words, but through your own lived experience. That's when faith stops being a concept and becomes a knowing deep in your bones. And here's what happens when you reach that place of knowing. The entire world shifts. Not because the world has changed, but because you have changed the lens through which you view it. I remember working with a woman who was drowning in debt. Every morning she woke up with anxiety clawing at her chest. Every bill that arrived felt like a personal attack from the universe. She came to me exhausted, defeated, asking how she could possibly speak words of abundance when her bank account was screaming poverty. I told her something that shocked her. Stop looking at your bank account as the source. She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. But it is the source, she said. That's where my money is. Or isn't. No, I replied gently. Your bank account is a reflection. The real source is infinite. The real source is the divine supply that flows through everything. And your bank account is simply one tiny pipeline through which it flows. When you worship the pipeline instead of acknowledging the infinite reservoir, you strangle the flow. This is the mistake so many of us make. We confuse the channel with the source. We think our job is the source, our spouse is the source, our inheritance is the source. And when those channels appear blocked or insufficient, we panic. But the truth? Those are just channels. Temporary, changeable, completely interchangeable channels. The real source is inexhaustible. It doesn't depend on your boss's mood or the economy or your age or your education. It depends only on your consciousness, on your ability to recognize and accept it. So this woman, despite her fear, started a new practice. Every time she felt that panic about money, she would stop and say, "The divine supply is infinite. All channels are open. My good now flows to me in avalanches of abundance." Did her bank account change overnight? No. But something more important changed. Her energy shifted. She stopped moving through the world with the vibration of desperation. And desperation is what keeps opportunity away. She started moving with the vibration of worth, and the world responded. Within 6 months, she met someone. Not someone she chased, not someone she convinced, not someone she had to perform for, someone who matched her energy, someone who saw her value because she had finally seen it herself. And she told me later, "I wasn't even looking for him when he showed up. I was just living." That is the law. You do not chase what is meant for you. You align with it. Now, I want to address something that trips people up constantly. They hear about affirmations and they think it's about tricking themselves. They think it's about pretending. They think it's about lying to themselves until the lie becomes true. That is not what this is. An affirmation is not a lie. It is the truth spoken before the evidence arrives. It is the statement of a spiritual fact that has not yet manifested in the physical realm. When you say, "I am abundant," you are not lying about your bank account. You are declaring your spiritual identity as a child of the infinite, and you are commanding that abundance to take form. Let me give you a perfect example. I worked with a man who was drowning in debt. I mean drowning. He owed money to everyone. Collection agencies were calling. His credit was destroyed. And he came to me desperate, asking what affirmation he should say. I told him, "Say this. All that is mine by divine right now comes to me in perfect timing and perfect ways." He looked at me like I had 3 heads. "That feels like a fantasy," he said. I owe $40,000. How is saying some sentence going to fix that? I looked him right in the eye and said, every single person who's ever transformed their financial situation started exactly where you are in disbelief. But they spoke anyway. The resistance you feel, that's your old pattern, fighting for survival. Your subconscious has been running the poverty program for so long, it thinks it's keeping you safe. When you introduce a new command, my financial burdens are lifted in ways I cannot yet see, the old program throws up every logical argument it can find. This is why most people quit before the miracle arrives. They speak the word once, twice, maybe a week. Nothing changes in the physical realm, so they say, see, I knew it wouldn't work. But they're looking at last season's harvest while planting new seeds. You don't dig up a seed every day to check if it's growing. The man called me 3 months later. His voice was different, lighter, almost bewildered. I don't know how to explain this, he said. My aunt, who I haven't spoken to in years, contacted me out of nowhere. She's paying off the debt. All of it. I wasn't surprised. I never am. Because here's what I've witnessed hundreds of times. When you stop arguing with the universe about what's possible, it stops arguing with you about what you deserve. You have to understand, your word is not begging. It's not pleading with some distant deity who may or may not be listening. Your word is law in your own consciousness. When you decree a thing, you set invisible forces into motion. The entire universe rearranges itself to match the pattern of your persistent inner speech. But, and this is critical, you must speak as if it's already accomplished. Not, I hope my debt will be cleared. Not, please let me get out of this mess. Those are the words of a beggar, and beggars receive scraps. Instead, I give thanks that I am free from all financial burden now. Present tense. Completed. Done. You're not trying to convince God. You're instructing your own deeper mind, which is connected to all supply, all solutions, all miraculous circumstances. And here's what most people miss. Your subconscious doesn't need repetition because it's forgetful. It needs repetition because you keep contradicting yourself. You speak your word in the morning. Infinite Spirit, open the way for my right work, my right home, my right relationship. Beautiful, powerful, done. And then by noon, you're on the phone with a friend saying, I'll never find anything in this market. Everything's too expensive. Nothing ever works out for me. You just canceled your own order. It's like calling a restaurant and saying, I'll have the salmon. And then before they can bring it, you call back and say, actually, cancel that. Bring me nothing. I don't deserve salmon. Nobody's ever brought me good food before. The universe doesn't say, well, which one did you really mean? It says, all right, I'll wait until you're clear. Your word has to be consistent. Not desperate, not repeated anxiously, just steady. Speak it once with conviction, and then spend the rest of your day times living as though it's already handled asterisk. That's the secret. That's the walk that matches the talk. When someone asks how you're managing, you don't rehearse your problems. You say, it's all working out, even if you don't see it yet, especially if you don't see it yet. Because your inner speech, what you say silently to yourself all day, matters just as much as the words you speak aloud in your formal treatments. I've watched people do every metaphysical exercise perfectly, every affirmation, every visualization, and still stay stuck. Why? Because, in between those exercises, they're running an inner monologue of fear, lack, and defeat. You can't plant seeds in the morning and pour poison on them all afternoon. The soil of your subconscious is always listening. It doesn't distinguish between your serious declarations and your casual complaints. It just says, oh, that's what we're manifesting today? Got it. So guard your inner conversations. Notice what you say when you think no one's listening, including yourself. That's where the real work happens. Not in the grand pronouncements, but in the steady hum of your habitual thinking. And when you catch yourself veering into the old story, you don't shame yourself. You just gently redirect. No, that's the old pattern. Here's the truth now. You're training your consciousness the way you'd train a muscle. And like any training, it takes repetition. It takes patience. But here's the beautiful part. Every single time you redirect, you're weakening the old neural pathway and strengthening the new one. You're literally rewiring your brain to expect good instead of catastrophe. I've seen people transform their entire lives simply by becoming vigilant about the stories they tell themselves in the quiet moments. Not the big declarations they make at workshops or the affirmations they paste on their mirrors, though those have their place, but the running commentary that plays all day long. You know the one I mean. It's the voice that says, "Of course this parking spot is taken," or "I knew they wouldn't call me back," or "This is just my luck." That voice is your creative power working against you. And here's what's wild. Most of us don't even notice it. We think those are just observations, neutral little comments about reality. But they're not neutral. They're instructions. They're prayers. And the universe doesn't distinguish between the prayers you say on your knees and the ones you mutter while stuck in traffic. So when I talk about changing your self-talk, I'm not talking about layering positive thinking over a foundation of fear. I'm talking about excavating down to that foundation and replacing it entirely. You're not putting wallpaper over a cracked wall. You're rebuilding the wall itself. And you do this sentence by sentence, thought by thought, moment by moment. When you notice yourself mentally rehearsing a difficult conversation and imagining all the ways it could go wrong, stop, reset. Imagine it going beautifully instead. See the other person receptive, kind, understanding. When you catch yourself calculating how you'll manage if the money doesn't come through, stop, redirect. Remind yourself that you live in an abundant universe and your supply is infinite. When you find yourself scrolling through worst-case scenarios like they're a menu you're ordering from, stop. Choose differently. Visualize the outcome you actually want, not the one your fear keeps serving up. This isn't denial. This is direction. You're not pretending problems don't exist. You're refusing to give them more power through your focused attention and emotional energy. Think of it this way. Your attention is like sunlight. Whatever you shine it on grows. If you keep examining the weeds, talking about the weeds, worrying about the weeds, you're feeding them with the most potent energy in the universe, your conscious awareness. But when you turn that same light toward the vision, toward the desired outcome, toward the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you're cultivating the garden you actually want to live in. I've watched people spend years analyzing why they're stuck. They become experts in their own limitations. They can tell you every reason why things won't work, every past failure, every obstacle in excruciating detail, and all that expertise keeps them exactly where they are. The brave ones, they become experts in their vision instead. They know what it feels like, they know what it looks like, they know the details of the life they're calling in. And because they've made that their area of focus, that's what expands. Here's something I want you to understand deeply. Your current circumstances are trying to convince you of their permanence. They're loud, they're persistent. They show up in your bank account, in your relationships, in your reflection. They demand your attention. But circumstances are effects, not causes. They're the output of yesterday's consciousness. And if you keep reacting to them, studying them, fighting them, you're just creating more of the same for tomorrow. This is where most people lose the game. They look at their reality and say, "But this is what's true right now." And yes, it's factual. But factual and true are not the same thing. The higher truth is what's possible. The higher truth is what you're calling into form through your imagination and emotional investment. When someone says to me, "But I have to face reality," I ask them, which reality? The one that's dissolving behind you, or the one that's forming ahead of you? Because you're always standing between two worlds, the world of what was and the world of what's coming. Most people keep turning around to look at what was, and they call that being realistic. But the real realists are the ones who understand that consciousness creates reality, and they guard their consciousness like their life depends on it, because it does. Your attention is not neutral. Your words are not neutral. Your emotional reactions are not neutral. They're all creative forces, and they're working right now, in this moment, to form your next experience. And this brings me to something that might surprise you: the power of interruption. We think change takes time. We think we have to slowly, gradually shift our thinking, that we need to practice and practice until one day, maybe, we'll finally master our words and thoughts. But Florence Scovel understood something radical. You can interrupt a pattern in an instant. She tells the story of a woman who came to her in absolute panic. Her husband had lost his job, and within hours she had spiraled into a complete state of terror. She was speaking words of doom, seeing visions of poverty, imagining herself homeless. Florence didn't try to console her with gentle platitudes. She didn't say, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." Instead, She stopped her mid-sentence and said, "You are to say nothing, not one word of lack or limitation. Every time you feel that fear rising, you will immediately speak this affirmation. God is my unfailing supply, and large sums of money come to me quickly, under grace, in perfect ways." The woman was skeptical. How could words possibly change her situation? The job loss was real, the bills were real, but she was desperate enough to try. Every time panic rose up, she interrupted it with the affirmation. Every time her mind started painting pictures of disaster, she deliberately replaced them with images of abundance. Within 3 days, her husband received an offer for an even better position than the one he'd lost. The salary was higher, the opportunities greater. Coincidence? Perhaps. But Florence saw this pattern repeat itself over and over in thousands of cases. You don't have to wait to feel better before you speak better. You interrupt the pattern first, and the feeling follows. This is where most people get it backwards. They think, "I'll affirm abundance when I feel abundant. I'll speak words of health when I feel healthy." But that's like saying, "I'll turn on the light when the room gets brighter." You turn on the light first. The brightness follows. Your word is the light switch. The universe doesn't respond to your doubt. It responds to your declaration. I worked with a woman who had been struggling financially for years. She came to me with notebooks full of affirmations she had written. "I've been doing this for months," she said, exhausted. "Why isn't it working?" I looked at her affirmations. They were beautiful, perfectly worded. But when she spoke them aloud, I heard the problem immediately. Her voice was apologetic, tentative. She sounded like she was asking permission from an invisible authority who might say no. "You're not speaking," I told her. "You're pleading." There's a difference between repeating words and speaking. The word, when you speak the word, you're not trying to convince the universe. You're not negotiating with God. You're not hoping your affirmation might possibly work if conditions are favorable. You're announcing what already exists in the invisible realm. You're calling forth what is already prepared for you. This woman learned to speak differently, not louder, but with certainty. With the quiet authority of someone who knows the check is already in the mail. Within weeks, an unexpected opportunity came through a connection she'd forgotten she had. Within months, her entire financial situation had transformed. What changed? Not her circumstances first. Her word changed first. Your word is not a request form you submit to the universe in triplicate, hoping it gets approved. Your word is a divine decree. When you truly understand this, you stop negotiating. You stop explaining. You stop justifying. You simply speak, and you watch what you've spoken take form. I've seen this principle work in the most impossible situations. Relationships that seemed dead, revived. Health conditions doctors called permanent, reversed. Financial disasters that looked final, completely turned around. Not through miraculous intervention from outside. Through the divine power of the spoken word, activated by someone who finally understood what they were holding. You are holding a sword, not a feather. Stop waving it gently and hoping something might shift. Speak with the authority that's already yours. The entire universe is waiting to hear what you have to say. You're not practicing anymore. You're not preparing for some distant moment when you'll finally be ready to claim what's yours. You're doing it now. Right now, as these words reach you, you're exercising the most potent force available to any human being, the power to name reality before it appears. I've watched people treat their words like casual observations, like they're simply reporting on what they see around them. I can't afford that. Things never work out for me. I always struggle with money. They think they're being honest. They think they're being realistic. What they're actually doing is building tomorrow's prison with today's vocabulary. Your words are not reflections, they're projections. They cast forward into the invisible substance that surrounds you, the substance that takes every impression you give it and hardens into circumstance. When you say, "I never have enough," that substance hears you. It's infinitely obedient. It doesn't argue. It doesn't fact-check. It simply says, "Your wish is my command," and begins arranging conditions to match your declaration. This is why changing your words feels so impossible at first. You look at your bank account and every fiber of your being wants to speak what you see. But what you see is only what you said yesterday, last week, last year. You're looking at old news, at manifestations that are already complete, already finished, they're done. They have no power except the power you give them by speaking them into tomorrow. When you understand this, really understand it, you stop caring so much about current evidence. You stop letting your present circumstances bully you into repeating the same old declarations. You start speaking from a different place entirely, from the place where your good has already been established, where abundance is the only reality, where every need is met before you even recognize it as a need. I'm not asking you to lie, I'm asking you to stop lying, because when you speak lack while standing in an abundant universe, that's the real falsehood. When you claim limitation while infinite supply surrounds you on every side, you're the one contradicting truth. You want evidence? Look at the acorn. Not a single acorn lies awake at night worrying whether it has what it takes to become an oak tree. It doesn't question the universe. It doesn't say, but what if there isn't enough soil? What if the conditions aren't right? It simply contains within itself the absolute conviction of its destiny, and the universe rushes to meet that conviction with rain, with sunlight, with minerals, with every element required. That acorn holds a picture, and the universe honors that picture without question, without judgment, without delay beyond the perfect timing of natural law. You are not less than the acorn. You are infinitely more. Yet you've convinced yourself that what works for every seed, every cell, every star in the heavens somehow doesn't apply to you and your bank account. I've watched this play out in lives too many times to count. A woman came to me once, so proud of her realism. She told me, "Mrs. Shinn, I'm just being honest about my situation. I have exactly $43. That's not a belief, that's a fact. I'm simply acknowledging reality." And I said to her, "What I'm saying to you now, that $43 is not your reality, it's your current experience. Reality is the infinite abundance that has already produced every resource you've ever received and stands ready to produce infinitely more." Within 3 weeks, that woman received a position she hadn't even applied for. Within 3 months, her circumstances had transformed so completely that she barely recognized her former self. What changed? Not the universe, not the supply available to her, only her willingness to stop defending her limitation and start claiming her inheritance. This is what I mean when I tell you that lack is a lie. Not because poverty doesn't exist in human experience, it clearly does, but because poverty has no existence in divine principle. It's a distortion, a misperception, a contradiction of the fundamental truth of infinite supply. When you speak lack, you're not being honest. You're being faithful to a false god. You're bowing down before the evidence of your senses and calling it truth, when truth exists in an entirely different dimension. The Christ understood this perfectly. He never once acknowledged limitation as having any power or reality. When faced with hunger and 5,000 people, he didn't say, "Well, let's be realistic about our resources." He gave thanks for the abundance and watched it multiply before physical eyes. This brings us to something I must emphasize with all the force of truth behind it. Your words are the most powerful creative force you possess, and you are using them every single moment to either build your kingdom or tear it down. You cannot speak defeat and expect to live in victory. You cannot rehearse your limitations and wonder why doors remain closed. You cannot repeat your fears and expect courage to find you. The universe doesn't hear your intentions, it hears your declarations. It responds to the word made flesh through your consistent speech. I have watched people pray for prosperity while speaking poverty all day long. They ask for abundance in the morning and then spend the afternoon telling everyone who will listen how broke they are, how expensive everything is, how impossible it is to get ahead. Then they wonder why their prayers seem to go unanswered. But prayers are not answered or unanswered, my friend. They are either empowered or canceled by the words that follow them. Your subconscious mind is listening to every word you speak. It's recording, accepting, and acting upon your statements as orders to be filled. When you say, "I can't afford it," your subconscious says, "Your wish is my command," and immediately begins arranging circumstances to match that statement. When you say, "I never get the breaks," your inner powers line up to fulfill that prophecy. When you declare, "Nothing ever works out for me," you've just given the most powerful force in the universe its marching orders. This is why the masters of every spiritual tradition have emphasized right speech. They understood what modern psychology is only now beginning to grasp: that you become what you repeatedly say about yourself. Your words aren't just sounds that disappear into thin air. They're living forces that take root in your subconscious mind and grow into your reality. I've watched people talk themselves into poverty, into loneliness, into failure, not through circumstance, but through the seeds they planted with their own declarations. Let me show you something remarkable. There was a woman who came to me, completely baffled by her circumstances. "I don't understand," she said. "I work so hard, but I'm always broke. Money just slips through my fingers." Listen carefully to what she just did. She created an identity statement. I'm always broke. She established a pattern. Money slips through my fingers. These weren't observations. They were commands to her subconscious mind, instructions for how to arrange her reality. I said to her, "Let's examine your words the way a gardener examines soil. What have you been planting?" We spent an hour simply listening to how she spoke about money. "I can't afford that. I'm terrible with money. Rich people are greedy. Money doesn't grow on trees." Every single statement was a brick in the prison wall. She'd built around her abundance. The transformation began, not with a new job or a windfall, but with new words. She started declaring, "Money flows to me easily and naturally." At first, it felt like lying. Her logical mind protested. But here's what most people miss. You're already lying with your negative declarations. When you say nothing works out, that's not truth, that's selective memory. That's focusing on failures while ignoring every breath you take, every sunset you've witnessed, every moment of joy you've experienced. Your current reality is simply the harvest of your previous thoughts and words. If you don't like the harvest, you must change the seeds. The farmer doesn't stand in his field, cursing the corn that grew from corn seeds, demanding that wheat should have appeared instead. He understands the law. He knows that next season, if he wants wheat, he must plant wheat seeds. It's that simple, yet we make it so complicated in our minds. I once counseled a woman who said, "But I've been hurt so many times. How can I possibly speak words of love and trust when my past proves people always betray me?" And I said to her, "Your past proves only one thing, that the seeds you've been planting have been growing exactly as they should. If you plant seeds of suspicion, you harvest betrayal. If you plant seeds of expectation of abandonment, you harvest loneliness. The universe is not punishing you. It's simply being faithful to its own nature." This understanding changes everything. You're not a victim of circumstances. You're not powerless before fate. You're a creator who's been creating unconsciously, and now you're being invited to create consciously. The shift happens the moment you take full responsibility for your inner world. Not blame, mind you. Responsibility. Blame looks backward and paralyzes. Responsibility looks forward and empowers. When something unpleasant manifests in your life, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What have I been speaking? What have I been thinking? What belief is this reflecting back to me?" This isn't about judging yourself harshly. It's about becoming aware of the connection between your inner world and your outer world. I'll tell you something that might surprise you. The universe doesn't care about your circumstances. It only responds to your consciousness. You can be in the most dire situation imaginable, and the moment you shift your words and thoughts, you initiate a shift in your reality. It might not happen instantly in the physical realm, but the wheels are set in motion immediately in the invisible realm. The invisible always precedes the visible. This is a law as fixed as gravity. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't see immediate results. But beneath the soil, in the darkness, tremendous activity is taking place. Roots are forming, energy is gathering, life is organizing itself. Your word works the same way. When you speak affirmatively, when you claim you're good, when you refuse to give power to appearances, you are planting seeds in the invisible realm of spirit, and they absolutely must push through into manifestation. I've watched people lose everything and rebuild through the power of the word alone. I've seen those who were ill told by every medical authority that there was no hope, and yet they changed their inner conversation. They stopped speaking the language of defeat, and their bodies responded. The body is remarkably obedient to the mind. It has no choice, really. It takes orders. If you continually speak of weakness, fatigue, and limitation, you are literally commanding your cells to express those qualities. But speak life, vitality, strength, divine perfection, and you issue new orders to every atom of your being. This is not fanciful thinking. This is metaphysics in action. Metaphysics means beyond the physical, and that is where all true causation resides. The physical world is the world of effects. The invisible world of thought, belief, and word is the world of cause. You cannot change an effect by working on the effect alone. You must go to the cause. You must change the inner pattern. I recall a woman who came to me years ago, wringing her hands over debt. She recited every creditor, every amount owed, every threat received. I stopped her and said, "You're rehearsing the problem, not the solution." She looked startled. I continued, "Every time you speak these fears aloud, you're watering weeds. Stop. Begin now to speak of abundance, to give thanks for divine supply, to declare that God is your source, not people, not banks, not employers. God is your unfailing, infinite source." She resisted at first. It felt dishonest to her, almost like lying. But I explained that she was actually being dishonest by denying the truth of her spiritual nature and claiming limitation instead. So, she began. Every morning, she looked in the mirror and said, "Infinite Spirit, open the way for my great abundance. I am an irresistible magnet for all that belongs to me by divine right." At first, the words felt hollow, but she persisted. Within 2 weeks, something extraordinary happened. A former colleague called her about a consulting opportunity, something she'd never considered. Within a month, she was earning more than she had at her old job, but with complete flexibility and joy in her work. You see, when you change your inner conversation, you change your outer circumstances. It's an immutable law. Now, I want you to notice something about your own inner dialogue today. How many times have you said or thought, "I can't afford that," or "money is tight," or "I'm so broke"? Each time you speak these words, even casually, even as a joke, you are setting a mold in the formless substance. You are instructing your subconscious mind. You are sending out a call into the invisible realm, and that realm must answer according to your word. Words are not just sounds we make. They are creative forces. They are containers of energy. The Bible tells us that life and death are in the power of the tongue. This is not poetic language. It is scientific fact, spiritual technology that has been known by mystics and masters throughout all ages. I once knew a man who constantly joked about being poor as a church mouse. He thought it was funny, harmless. But year after year, despite working hard, despite having good ideas, he could never get ahead. His poverty was not a condition, it was a conviction. It was a habit of thought made manifest. When I finally convinced him to stop this phrase, to stop claiming poverty even in jest, his circumstances began to shift within weeks. A legal settlement he'd forgotten about came through. An old debt was repaid. New opportunities appeared. Your word is your wand. You're casting spells every moment of the day, whether you know it or not. Every declaration, every complaint, every fear spoken aloud, these are incantations shaping your tomorrow. I knew a woman who would say, morning after morning, "I never have enough time, I'm always rushed." And indeed, she lived in perpetual chaos, always late, always frantic. One day I stopped her and said, "What if you spoke differently? What if you declared, 'I have plenty of time for everything that truly matters'?" She looked at me, as if I'd suggested she sprout wings and fly. But desperation makes us willing to try strange remedies. She began her new decree. For 3 days, nothing changed. Her old momentum was still carrying her forward. But she persisted. "I have plenty of time. Divine timing governs my day." And then something shifted. Appointments canceled, giving her breathing room. A meeting she dreaded was postponed. Tasks that usually took hours resolved themselves in minutes. She began to move through her days with an ease that felt miraculous, but it wasn't magic, it was law. Universal law, responding to a changed vibration. Your word rearranges the invisible before it touches the visible. I want you to understand something crucial. You're not begging the universe for favors. You're not pleading with a distant deity. You're activating law. When you turn on a light switch, you don't beg the electricity to flow, you simply complete the circuit. Your spoken word completes the spiritual circuit. But here's where most people stumble. They speak their desire once, then spend the next 23 hours contradicting it with worry. They plant the seed in the morning and dig it up by afternoon to see if it's growing. Faith is not looking at the empty soil and seeing only dirt. Faith is knowing the seed is doing its invisible work beneath the surface. I trust the process completely. What is mine comes to me by divine right. This becomes your steady drum, your heartbeat decree, not spoken in desperation, but in calm certainty. The universe doesn't respond to your begging, it responds to your conviction. Let me tell you about a man who needed employment. He had been searching for months, growing more anxious with each rejection. When he came to me, I said, "Stop searching from fear. Start declaring from faith." We crafted his statement. I am divinely guided to my perfect work. The right position now reveals itself. He spoke it daily, but more importantly, he stopped the fearful conversations. When friends asked about his job search, instead of recounting his struggles, he said simply, "It's working out perfectly." Within 2 weeks, a position found him not through the applications he'd sent, but through an unexpected encounter that opened an entirely new door. This is the critical difference between affirmation and declaration. An affirmation whispers timidly, a declaration stands firm. When you declare, "Divine right action is taking place in my life now," you're not hoping, you're claiming what is already yours in the invisible realm. I knew a woman whose marriage had become a battlefield of resentment. Years of small wounds had calcified into walls of silence. She came to me exhausted, ready to surrender, but not knowing how. I told her, "Stop rehearsing your grievances. Every time you replay the hurt, you water those poisonous seeds." Instead, she began declaring, "Divine love now dissolves every seeming obstacle and makes clear my way." She said it morning and evening. And here's what happened. Not what she expected, but what she needed. The declaration didn't change her husband overnight. It changed her. The bitterness began lifting like morning fog. She saw moments of tenderness she'd been too angry to notice. She responded with grace, where she'd habitually responded with defense. Within 3 months, they were speaking a new language. The same two people, but operating from an entirely different frequency. Her husband later told her, "I don't know what shifted, but suddenly I could feel you again." This is not psychological manipulation. This is spiritual law. When you change your consciousness, you change your world. Your outer conditions are always a perfect reflection of your inner states. Always. Now, let me address the question I hear constantly. But what if I declare something and nothing happens? This reveals a fundamental misunderstanding. Something is always happening. The work occurs first in the invisible, before it manifests in the visible. Seeds germinate in darkness before they break through soil. Your faith is working even when you see nothing with your physical eyes. I've watched people grow discouraged after a week of treatment, after a month of affirmation. They say, "Nothing's happening. This doesn't work." But I tell them everything is happening. You simply cannot see it yet. The farmer doesn't dig up his seeds 3 days after planting to check if they're growing. He knows better. He understands the law. He trusts the process. He waters, he tends, he waits with expectation, not anxiety. There's a profound difference between those two states. Expectation is faith in action. Anxiety is faith in disaster. You must learn to rest in your faith. Not the rest of inactivity, but the rest of knowing. It's the deep calm that comes from understanding that universal law is already arranging circumstances, moving people, opening doors that you don't even know exist yet. Your job is not to make it happen through force. Your job is to hold the vision and follow your intuitive leads. I remember a woman who came to me desperate for work. She'd been unemployed for months. I gave her this statement: "Infinite Spirit, open the way for my right work, my right place. I am guided and directed every step. I follow divine leading, and all doors open for me." She said it faithfully, but after 2 weeks, she complained that nothing had changed. I asked her, "Have you had any intuitive nudges? Any thoughts to contact someone or go somewhere?" She admitted she'd thought about calling an old colleague, but dismissed it as pointless. They hadn't spoken in years. I told her, "That's your lead. Follow it." She made the call. That colleague mentioned her to someone at their company. Within a week, she had an interview. Within a month, she had the position, but she almost missed it by dismissing her guidance as mere coincidence. This is how the invisible becomes visible. Through the bridge of your intuition, through the path of inspired action. The universe speaks to you constantly, but you must listen. You must trust those whispers, those sudden thoughts, those inexplicable urges to turn left instead of right, to pick up the phone, to attend that gathering you almost skipped. Your demonstration is often closer than you think. The final stages of manifestation can happen with astonishing speed once all invisible arrangements are complete. Suddenly, everything clicks into place. What seemed impossible yesterday becomes inevitable today. The universe operates on divine timing, not human schedules. When we become impatient, we send a signal of doubt, and doubt delays our demonstrations. But when we rest in absolute certainty, knowing that what is ours by divine right cannot be withheld from us, we accelerate the entire process. I once knew a woman who was waiting for her demonstration of supply. Every day she would check her mailbox with anxiety, wondering when her good would arrive. One day I said to her, "Stop looking for it, act as though it's already handled." She took my words to heart and began to go about her days with peace and assurance. Within a week, she received an unexpected check, not from any source she had been monitoring, but from a direction she had never anticipated. The universe always knows the fastest route. You see, when we try to dictate how times our good must come, we close 1,000 doors and leave only one open. But when we simply declare our word and release it, we allow infinite intelligence to work through unlimited channels. Your good may come through a person you've never met, an opportunity you've never considered, an idea that suddenly illuminates your mind in the middle of the night. This is why affirmations of specific outcomes must always be coupled with the words "this" or "something better." We do not limit the divine plan. We do not tell the universe which route to take. We simply state our claim and stand firm in faith, knowing that infinite intelligence sees the entire chessboard while we see only a few squares. The invisible world is not separate from the visible world, it is the cause of it. Every single thing you see around you existed first as a thought, a word, a feeling. The chair you sit in, the device you hold, the building you inhabit, all were once invisible. They were ideas in consciousness before they became objects in form. And so it is with your demonstration. It exists now in the invisible realm, waiting only for your consistent acceptance to bring it through the veil into manifestation. The invisible realm is not distant or difficult to access. It is right here, right now, surrounding you like the air you breathe. You move through it constantly, though most people remain unaware of its presence. But awareness is everything. The moment you become conscious of this invisible storehouse of all possibilities, you gain access to its infinite treasures. I knew a woman who applied this principle with remarkable results. She needed employment desperately, yet every door seemed to close before her. She came to me discouraged, ready to accept any menial position just to survive. I said to her, "No, we will not accept limitation. Your right work exists now in the invisible. We must claim it and bring it into visibility." Together, we spoke the word. We affirmed that her perfect position, with perfect pay, doing work she loved, was already prepared for her. We gave thanks that it was done. She went home and continued this practice, refusing to accept anything less than her divine selection. Within 2 weeks, a friend mentioned a position that had just opened one that required her exact combination of skills and experience, something rare and specific. She applied and was immediately hired at a salary far beyond what she had thought possible. But here is the crucial point. That position had always existed. It was not created the moment she needed it. It was there in the invisible realm of infinite supply, and her recognition and acceptance of it brought it into her experience. This is how the law operates. Not by creating something from nothing, but by bringing through into visibility what already exists in the realm of pure potential. Your demonstration is not being manufactured. It is being revealed. Like the sculptor who sees the angel in the marble and simply chips away everything that is not the angel, you are removing the obstacles of doubt, fear, and limited thinking that hide your good from view. Every great thing that has ever come into manifestation followed this pattern. The inventor sees the completed invention before a single part is assembled. The architect sees the finished building before the first brick is laid. The artist sees the painting before the brush touches canvas. They are all working with the same principle, recognizing in the invisible before manifesting in the visible. And you must do the same with your demonstration. See it finished, feel it accomplished, know it complete. Not as something that might happen someday if conditions align, but as something that already exists in the higher realm of truth, pressing through into your experience now. This is why I speak with such insistence about the word. Your word is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. Every word you speak carries the vibration of either faith or fear, acceptance or resistance. When you declare, "I am prospered," you set into motion forces that must bring prosperity. When you say, "I can't afford it," you cement that limitation into your experience. I have seen people turn their entire lives around with a change of words. A woman once came to me drowning in debt, speaking constantly of lack, of bills she couldn't pay, of the impossibility of her situation. I stopped her mid-sentence. "We will not speak of what is," I told her. "We speak only of what is to be." From that day forward, she disciplined her tongue. Instead of "I'm broke," she would say, "My supply is coming." Instead of "I can't," she said, "The way is being prepared." Within months, unexpected channels opened. Money came from directions she never anticipated. The outer merely rearranged itself to match her inner conviction. You must become vigilant, a watchman at the gate of your consciousness. Catch every word before it leaves your lips. Does this word build or destroy? Does it open or close? Does it affirm truth or perpetuate illusion? This is not about positive thinking masking negative feeling that never works. This is about aligning your speech with divine reality, speaking from the end, declaring what God has already established. And here is what many miss. You must praise your way into manifestation. Praise is the highest form of faith. When you give thanks before you see, you demonstrate absolute trust. The Israelites marched around Jericho praising God before the walls fell. They didn't wait for evidence. Their praise was the evidence, the very substance of things hoped for. I tell you to praise everything, even that which seems contrary. Praise clears the path. It neutralizes resistance. It shifts your vibration from grasping to receiving. When you're trying to force something into form, stop trying and start praising. Thank the invisible for what is already yours in the realm of reality. This isn't denial of your current circumstances, it's recognition of a higher circumstance, a truer reality that your senses haven't yet registered. This is why the most powerful spiritual practitioners I've encountered weren't those who spent hours in meditation, caves, or recited the most prayers. They were the ones who laughed in the face of apparent disaster. They were the ones who said, "Well, isn't this interesting," when the bank account showed zero. They were the ones who whispered, "Thank you," when the diagnosis came back, not because they were grateful for illness, but because they knew something their circumstances didn't know. You see, gratitude in the midst of challenge isn't about being thankful for the problem. It's about being thankful that the problem is already solved in the invisible. It's about recognizing that what appears as an ending is merely a bend in the road. Every apparent loss is carrying with it a gift you haven't yet unwrapped. I've watched this play out in the most extraordinary ways. A woman loses her job and feels devastated. But instead of dwelling in fear, she begins to give thanks for her perfect right work. Within weeks, she receives an offer for a position she didn't even know existed, one that paid twice her previous salary and aligned with gifts she'd forgotten she possessed. The job loss wasn't a tragedy. It was a divine course correction that looked like disaster to her human eyes. A man's relationship ends after 10 years, and he's certain his life is over. But he begins blessing his former partner and giving thanks for his perfect divine companion. 6 months later, he meets someone who fits him so perfectly that he realizes the previous relationship had to end to make space for this one. The heartbreak was the demolition crew, clearing ground for a new foundation. This is the alchemy of gratitude. It transforms poison into medicine, obstacles into opportunities, delays into divine timing. When you praise instead of resist, you align with the intelligence that's orchestrating events for your highest good, even when those events look nothing like what you planned. So here's what I'm inviting you to do right now. In whatever circumstance you find yourself, find something to praise. Not something false or forced, but something genuinely praiseworthy about your life, your journey, your character, or even just the fact that you're still here, still breathing, still capable of transformation. Maybe it's the simple fact that you had the courage to listen this far. Maybe it's the strength you've shown just by getting through this week. Maybe it's the unexpected kindness someone showed you yesterday, or the quiet resilience that keeps you moving forward when everything in you wants to give up. Whatever it is, find it. Name it. Speak it aloud if you can. Because here's what happens in that moment of genuine praise. You shift your vibration. You move from the frequency of complaint to the frequency of recognition. And recognition is the doorway to manifestation. When you recognize the good that's already present, you create space for more good to enter. It's not magical thinking, it's spiritual law, like attracts like. The energy you emit is the energy you attract back. I've watched people completely transform their circumstances simply by changing what they chose to acknowledge. A woman who'd been unemployed for months, frustrated and bitter, finally decided to praise the extra time she had with her children instead of resenting her situation. Within 2 weeks, an opportunity appeared that wouldn't have been possible if she'd still been locked into her old job. The universe wasn't punishing her with unemployment, it was positioning her. But she couldn't see the positioning until she stopped fighting the process. That's the difference between those who break through and those who stay stuck. The ones who break through learn to praise the process, not just the outcome. They learn to say thank you before the check arrives, to feel grateful before the healing manifests, to celebrate the lesson before they fully understand what they're learning. This doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means choosing to see perfection in the unfolding, even when the current chapter is difficult. It means trusting that your story isn't over, that this scene is setting up something better, that the author of your life knows exactly what needs to happen next. And sometimes, what needs to happen next is simply this. You need to stop fighting. You need to lay down your weapons of worry, your shields of cynicism, your armor of self-protection. You need to become vulnerable enough to receive. Because the universe cannot fill hands that are clenched into fists. I've watched people pray for abundance while simultaneously holding on to poverty consciousness like it's their most precious possession. They ask for love while keeping their hearts locked behind walls of old hurts. They beg for opportunity while refusing to release the familiar comfort of limitation. There's a profound paradox in the spiritual life. You must become empty to be filled. You must release to receive. You must surrender to gain mastery. This isn't about passivity, this is about making space. Think of yourself as a vessel. If you're filled to the brim with fear, anxiety, resentment, and resistance, where exactly is the good supposed to go? The universe is trying to pour blessings into your life, but you're already overflowing with everything that blocks them. So yes, sometimes the most powerful action you can take is to simply stop. Stop the mental arguments. Stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios. Stop defending your limitations as if they're your identity. I know a woman who spent 5 years working on her financial situation. She read every book, attended every seminar, made every vision board. But beneath all that activity, she was terrified of actually having money. Terrified of the responsibility, the visibility, the change it would bring. Her breakthrough came not from doing more, but from finally admitting, "I'm afraid. And I'm ready to let that fear go." Within 3 months, everything shifted. Not because she found some new technique, but because she finally made room for what she'd been asking for all along. Your demonstrations are often delayed, not by lack of effort, but by lack of receptivity. You're so busy pushing, striving, forcing, and manipulating that you've closed yourself off from the natural flow of good that's always moving toward you. The universe doesn't need your anxiety to make things happen. It doesn't require your worry as fuel. Your fear is not the price of admission to your good. What it needs is your yes, your openness, your willingness to believe that life is supporting you, not testing you. And here's what I want you to understand as we come to the close of our time together. This entire journey, every word, every principle, every truth we've explored, it all comes down to one simple shift. The shift from believing you must fight life to trusting that life is fighting for you.